All right, now we get to one of my other interests, which is presidential history, and we're in a pretty important room in presidential history, at least from pop culture perspective. So I think I'm going to start by running the video so you can see what occurred in here, and then I'll talk about it a little bit. I'll start talking.
We interrupt the regular program schedule to bring you the following special report from ABC News in Washington. Here is David Shoemaker.
Good evening. The operative word in the Nixon administration these days is phase, and tonight we enter what the president's aides are calling phase 2 of a credibility crusade. Phase 1 took place here in Washington over the past 2 weeks. The president privately briefing virtually every Republican in town and most of the Democrats. Phase 2 begins tonight in Orlando, Florida, more specifically at Disney World, where the managing editors of 400 or so newspapers are holding a convention. This will be a news conference for the editors. The White House press corps is there, but muzzled. So Mr. Nixon is going above the reporters' heads to their bosses, a group of men less used to asking tough questions, men more in awe of the presidency, and men on their best behavior since their wives are in the room.
Yes, ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States.
And so that's where the money came from. Let me just say this, and I want to say this to the television audience. I made my mistakes, but in all of my years of public life, I have never profited from public service. I've earned every cent. And in all of my years of public life, I have never obstructed justice. And I think, too, that I can say that in my years of public life, that I welcome this kind of examination, because people have got to know whether or not their president is a crook. Well, I'm not a crook. I've earned everything I've got.
Okay, so that was here in the Ballroom of the Americas, November 17th, 1973. It was an hour-long press conference. The AP editors, the Associated Press editors from newspapers around the country were here for their annual convention. And he was addressing questions not related to Watergate. He was addressing questions to a concurrent issue going on in his administration that related to his 1969-1970 tax returns. And what happened there was you made $200,000 a year as president at that time. He took a tax deduction for the donation of his vice presidential papers to the National Archives. And that was something that former President Lyndon Johnson had done and said, hey, you should do this because you can take a huge write-off and not pay any taxes. And in fact, he had only paid a few $100s in taxes in those years. The practice was actually disallowed by legislation in late 1969. So in 1974, not long before he resigned, the IRS actually issued a ruling and said he had to file corrected returns, and he ended up paying about $400,000 in back taxes with taxes and penalties. So that's what he was addressing. Now, I want to show you where that happened. So if we could bring the house lights up and turn my my microphone on here, the walking mic. There we go. Perfect. So when we saw this picture, we assumed he was standing down here, that he had walked in from that door over there and came in and stood here and addressed the room. And as Todd and I spent one day, it was like what the Zapruder film watching, as we're trying to figure out where this all actually occurred. So it wasn't there because Todd's looking at the ceiling in the photo and says, no, the room divider's there. So there's no room divider here. The room divider's actually back here. So what we figured out was the room was actually set up like this, and that gold curtain along the wall is in front of the stage here. So he was actually walking through here. I put a flag up so you can see where he came in. You didn't notice this flag all day. And so, let me go outside the door so you can at least get the impression of what happened on the video. So we walked out here and we said, ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States. And so he stood here and took questions from the audience of folks for about an hour on national television. So we have You wanted a meet and greet with Figment in the Dreamfinder or with the Orange Bird. I can't bring you that, but throughout lunch you can have your picture taken with President Nixon in the spot where he gave his famous press conference. Now, I will tell you, as I walk back to the stage, I desperately wanted to hire a Richard Nixon impersonator. But as President Nixon's been dead for 25 years, the market for impersonators for dead presidents is very small if you didn't sign the Constitution. So that is the story of President Nixon in the ballroom. Now, on to our luncheon. What is a handwich? Well, we've played this video promoting the event, but you need the quick explanation, so here it is.
Keith, I've been dying to know, what is a handwich? It's a sub kind of roll that instead of being served in a long fashion, sandwich fashion, the bread is hollowed out so that you can stuff the meats inside and eat it actually like a cone. Mm-hmm. So you can walk, talk, and eat.
And have a free
eat as
hand.
you go kind of thing. Yeah, it's a handwich.
There you are. Here's what we know about the handwich, the famous foodstuff from Walt Disney World history. It was introduced approximately 1986-87. It was sold until around 1995. Locations were Adventureland and Tomorrowland at the Space Bar, which is now, what is that called now? Launching Pad. The Farm Market and Epcot Center's Land Pavilion, and at Disney MGM Studios. Now, I have a list of fillings, and you'll notice some with a star next to them. Ham and cheese, roast beef and cheese, tuna salad, and barbecued chopped chicken. Those are 4 items that are on the menu today out there that you can fill your handwich with. You notice I have a star next to Cobb salad and ambrosia salad because when they opened the Disney MGM Studios, they sold a handwich filled with Cobb salad. So if you choose to mix your Cobb salad and stuff it into a handwich roll today, you can pay tribute to Disney MGM Studios' 30th anniversary. The ambrosia salad befuddled me a little bit because it seems like an odd thing to put in a roll. But we learned, so I wasn't satisfied that I knew enough about handwiches. So I tracked down an Imagineer who served on the team that developed the handwich, and she was in Paris for 3 weeks. She's retired a few years ago, named Peggy Ferris, after a 49 career year, I think it was, with Disney. And we conducted an interview last Monday night where she talked all about the handwich. So I am bringing that to you now because you need to know all about your lunch before you eat it.
Back at Imagineering, Michael Eisner challenged us to think about fun food. So that was the big idea. And he was relating the fact that when he was a kid and he went to the New York World's Fair, there were foods that had been introduced for the first time at the fair. And I think Belgian waffles might have been one of those things.
Yeah.
So we initiated a big brainstorming session. We involved a lot of Imagineers, Eric Jacobson, Joe Rohde, Kevin Rafferty, just probably a dozen or more. We also included people from the Walt Disney World and Disneyland food operations. Obviously we could think about what might be fun, but whether it was feasible was another question. So we did a day-long brainstorming session. We came up with dozens and dozens of food ideas. We then sort of put it through a matrix of how fun is this on a scale of 1 to 5, and how easy would this be to produce on a scale of 1 to 5. Then we looked at things that fell within the quadrant of very fun and pretty easy. So from that, we did sort of a refinement, talk to the foods people, and somehow, and I don't recall exactly, somehow the idea of something you could hold in your hand and eat while you're walking through the park, that would be really fun. Now, we called it Castle Cone, and we worked with Gail Cole, who was managing the cafeteria at Imagineering, and she developed a couple of prototypes for us. And at that point, the cone was delicate, and the toppings were elegant and delicious. There was a mushu shrimp. There was something like a berry, a melange of berries. I don't remember what the other items were, but they were all really delectable.
Okay.
And I remember Michael and Frank coming over to the conference room. I think it was Kevin Rafferty, who had written a really charming little poem that introduced the castle cone and its attributes, its role, and it was really a cute introductory thing. And then they said, "Yeah, we like this. Let's proceed." So Marty Sklar, who was creative executive in charge of Imagineering, Marty asked Eric Jacobson, Tracy Trenist, I think her name is Tracy Austin now, and me to fly to Florida the week before Christmas and work with the Walt Disney World food people and the marketing folks on the implementation of this, taking this from the concept idea to something that could be actually produced and served in the parks. And we had our preliminary meetings with the chefs and showed them what we had in mind and the design for the castle cone, and then we flew home. So the transition, sort of the metamorphosis of how we got from castle cones to Handwich is something that happened at Walt Disney World. The marketing folks, I think, felt that they wanted to convey that this was more like a sandwich alternative. And so they changed the name from Castle Cone to Handwich. And the chefs were looking at local vendors who could produce the cones that would be available and stable and hold up to the kind of handling that would happen, and probably looking at margins and what the food preferences of the Walt Disney World guest might be. And so from that, they transitioned from things like mushu pork and this melange of fresh berries to things that were maybe more recognizable. So I think that's how we got things like mac and cheese and tuna salad and whatever else ended up in the castle cone or the Handwich. So, our role was very conceptual. I guess it was instrumental in launching an idea, but it was also a really good example of how you go from sort of the high concept to something that you can serve to hundreds of people an hour or thousands of people an hour, and for a price point that works and with toppings that are appealing to the palate of the Walt Disney World guest. So that's my only that was my experience with it. It is the novelty. I mean, what we were really after was, can we come up with something that would really be fun and you'd associate it with your Disney experience, and apparently it stuck with lots of people. So that's great to hear. Good. Well, thank you for asking, Brian. It's always fun to have somebody who is curious to know how something started and what kind of an evolution it experienced. And so thank you.
I imagine when she hung the phone up, she turned to her husband and said, "Some guy just called me about a sandwich I made 30 years ago." So Todd is eating a Handwich right now, and you can eat your own. How this process works is the buffet is out the back door, and then you're going to come in the Richard Nixon door as you re-enter the room. And you saw my note on the menu. Just as our VIPs and guests get up there, there's a limited time for lunch. So please allow them to cut in line as they get up to the buffet. And the last thing is, during lunch, we're going to be running a Hal Bowers exclusive, and I'll let him come out and tell you a little bit about that while I run to get my Handwich.
Yeah. All right. So there's two things to let you know for today. One is one of my other little things that I do on the side besides being a Walt Disney World nut is I am a tiki drink and cocktail nut. So we actually have a special cocktail that I made for today. It's called the RetroMagic. It is available for purchase out when you go get your Handwiches. It is a gin-based drink but so we keep it light, so it's not crazy. It's good. It's gin. Let me get the recipe out here. So it's gin, pineapple juice, blue curacao, because we want that special. First of all, you can't have a drink on Disney property with that blue curacao. I think we all know that. But second, because we wanted to make it RetroMagic, it makes for a nice base color. Lime juice, and then a little ingredient that is hard to find, so I think this will make a nice touch, called Don's Mix, which is from something that Don the Beachcomber came up with 70 years ago, which is a really nice kind of cinnamony flavor. So it's not like a crazy strong drink, but I think you will enjoy it. That's available. And then during lunch, we're going to run some video that I took of Horizons, because one of the things that we talked about as Horizons was closing down, and as we found out that attractions were closing down, there were a group of us that went in and we took photographs, videos. I mean, for Horizons, we'll be watching a video that I took with a special widescreen adapter that I put on my video camera so I could try to get as much of the view as possible, because through a normal video camera, you could only see so little. But we took actually, and you'll see, so today, as it kicks in, you'll see it suddenly go widescreen. There's some slides and some video that we're just bringing out now of a lot of nooks and crannies of Horizons that you haven't seen before. And I literally have hundreds of hours of video that we are converting to put out this year. But we're going to start today with Horizons. So that will be running during the duration of lunch. So you can just kind of pop up and look at it as you're eating. And I think that's it, right? We can let people go get some food now? All right, everybody, go eat!
This is the ham and cheese, and then at the very end is the tomato.
Anyway, so do not tempt the labor. That's okay. And he planned actually the original long weekend. This is pulled chicken. Thank you.
And this is supposed to be.
Here we go.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Super. Thank you.
How about yourself?
And by doing any better idea, a RetroMagic.